So this is pretty interesting times being, this is I think it's been a while since my first puppet camp, which was probably something like 12 or 13 years ago in San Francisco. And it's really great to have puppet camps back. I think this is one of the most exciting things that we've had happen this year, but this isn't the shape we expected them all to be in. It's great to have everyone here from the community, and to have this event happening regardless. I was hoping to see you all in person, but this is a lot of the world that we live in these days. So let me go through what I see going on at the moment. I think there's a lot of talk you get from vendors, from people, I'm sure all of you are inundated with emails, people talking about COVID-19 and everything that's going on. But I think the most relevant thing for all of us really is that this has just been very much a pressure cooker situation, particularly for any of you who are working in enterprise IT. It's a pretty different world to the one we were expecting. But I think what I've seen is that this is really accelerating a bunch of trends that were already in place. And so it's rather than changing anything really radically in terms of automation and IT, it's just meant that a lot of these trends are going much faster and proceeding much more quickly than any of us really expected. And the three big trends that I've been seeing for a while now are self-service automation, in that people are realizing that they need to build infrastructure and automation that other areas of the business can actually adopt and use when they need to actually use them. Rather than sort of having everyone interacting inside the same code base, we're seeing more and more people start to build solutions that other people inside the organization are adopting, whether that be you're an operations team, building things for your developers, for your security folks, for your change management teams, audit and compliance. We're really seeing that this is the way people are realizing that there's a lot more scale. But to get there, you really need programmatic infrastructure. And I think in many ways, this has been one of the biggest lessons I think the cloud has taught all of us, which has been that having an API, having programmatic infrastructure is actually really, really key to being able to move quickly and to be able to build those sort of self-service interfaces for folks. And I guess finally, and this is one that I think has been the biggest change over the last few years, has been moving to much more of a product mindset for IT and operations folks. Rather than just building self-service automation and just exposing something that you're already doing to someone else inside the business, it's having much more of a product mindset, thinking about the people who are using your product as a consumer, as a customer, and having that sort of thinking about the user experience, thinking about the user interface, and not just sort of exposing plumbing to them, but working out how you can take self-service philosophy and your programmatic infrastructure to build something that feels much more like a product or a solution that's aimed at their problems. And I think this has been one of the things that I've seen as a really interesting evolution, which has been that automation has always been a really good API between teams in terms of interactions of one team needs something from another team, building it in terms of automation, building a self-service interface. But then that next sort of level is taking a product mindset and thinking about it. What would this be if I was building an actual solution, solving the person who's using it, solving their problem, not just making my life easier, but thinking about how I can solve their problem. They've been the big trends that I've been seeing. And I think to get there, you need to have an automation platform that's flexible, that works in a bunch of different ways. You need something that's agent-based, which is, and for many of you, if you've been using Puppet for a while, where we started was agent-based and model-based, which we still think is a really, really great way and the best way of managing infrastructure over time, where you care about the state that things are in. If you need to define the state that infrastructure's in, and you need to maintain it over a period of time, and you need to do drift remediation and all of those things, agent-based and model-based works really well. But not everything is a compute device. We're starting to interact with more and more different services that don't necessarily have compute behind them. And not everything works as a model-based system. We're seeing that with Bolt, that task-based systems are actually really, really critical. And one of the key examples I always come back to here is that if you want to maintain, say, the state of an application that's relatively complex on a full operating system, a model-based approach works really well. But sometimes the things you need to do are actually just operational tasks, like add a machine to a load balancer pool, remove it from a load balancer pool to check it for something. Not everything you do is always model-based, and having a platform, which is what we think we're doing with all of our products here, that lets you be agent-based, lets you be agentless, lets you do task-based actions, and lets you manage model-based configuration, we think really gives you the flexibility of being able to build different kinds of self-service products for other people who you're interacting with. So one of the things we're very proud of here is that, we try and maintain consistency as much as possible across all of these areas. So that things that you, as you say, first getting into Puppet and Bolt, and you're starting to learn a task-based system, the things you're learning about the Puppet language are still valuable for you in a model-based approach. And you can actually start using those configuration code snippets in different kinds of modes. So we're here at a community event. And, community has always been really important to me and to Puppet. There's a whole bunch of different things we do here. The Forge is really amazing. If you haven't gone and looked at the Forge for a while, I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, about the other work that we're doing. I want to do a huge shout out to Vox Populi, as always, who've done an incredible job maintaining a whole bunch of modules and really serving the rest of the community in a really, really, really powerful and important way. If you want to find out more about the Vox Populi folks, you can always, there'll be several of them in the Slack at the moment. Feel free to go and ask people different questions about this. I think the community, again, is really important to us. And I want to reiterate the code of conduct that was raised earlier. I think us, being really strong about enforcing the code of conduct, this has been one of the reasons why I think we have a healthy and really supportive community. So please, it's not just a checkbox for us. It's actually something that we think has led to the strength of community that we actually have right now. Infrastructure is kind of complicated, and particularly when you're getting started with automation tools, I think it's really important to have that supportive community there. And so for those of you who've been around for a while, the work you do helping out new users, making them feel welcome to the community, it's all really, really important, and we thank you for that. So there's a few different things we've got going on at the moment that are sort of in response to the current environment of things. We've got a whole bunch of free Bolt workshops that are going on and self-paced training that you can go through. We've actually opened up free access to the open source support portal through to June of this year. And this is one of the things I really, really like, we've got these Ask an Expert office hours in Slack. And feel free to come and chat to us about any of that in the Slack room. And you can see this is where we start to try and connect more people inside Puppet, the company, with the rest of the community. So when we're talking about Puppet tasks, I'm going to go through some of the things we've been doing lately in the product. So what I want to make sure is that as I'm talking through all of this, go and have a look at the configuration management page. We've got the URL there on your screen. It's relatively easy to find on the Forge, and that'll show a whole bunch of examples of what you can do with tasks and plans. So using Bolt, you can run tasks and plans from your laptop. But we also have in Puppet Enterprise, commercial distribution of Puppet that we have, the ability to now run tasks and plans and generate GUIs for them. And if you need those sort of enterprise capabilities, you can take the tasks and plans that you've built in Bolt and run them in Puppet Enterprise and move them around vice versa. And this is what we meant about being flexible in different kinds of modes of automation. So whether you're applying that automation in a one-off method, whether you're doing it in a consistent, enforcing desired state in Puppet Enterprise, you can run it using the best of both worlds. And again, to reiterate, please go check out the Forge for more examples of the sorts of things you can do with tasks and plans, where you get to create more of a flow and workflow around how those tasks interact and execute. This is one of the things we're doing that I'm actually really, really excited about. We're seeing more and more that people are adopting Puppet Enterprise. They have multiple different islands of automation inside their organization. And so what we've come out with is what we're calling a state reporting, where you can take all of that data that you're collecting through Factor and that's stored in PuppetDB, and we can make that data more accessible to other areas inside the business. This isn't just useful for the infrastructure teams who may be tying together different estates of Puppet Enterprise, but it allows you to give a sort of a simpler interface to other people, such as your security teams, procurement, people who sort of care about that higher level view across the whole infrastructure. This really gives you real-time insight into the hybrid environment that you're running, whether they be cloud instances, on-premise, virtualized, lets you just know what you have and what the state of those things are. Because we tend to see that that sort of visibility across the whole environment becomes really, really critical to having, successful automation at scale. And this actually lets you use the action engine inside Puppet Enterprise to go and identify different nodes and go and perform tasks against them. This is currently in alpha, and it's going to be appearing in the CD for PE console sometime before June. And if you want more information on that, you can email lidar@puppet.com. So for an awful lot of you, you're probably interacting with an ITSM system of some kind. And for a lot of you, you're probably running something like ServiceNow for that. And we're seeing that more and more inside a big organization, we have a highly automated operations or infrastructure team, but they end up being slowed down by their ITSM system and the fact that those two things are quite disconnected from each other. And it turns out, having some sort of a change management system for managing change and making it visible and dealing with all of the approvals at a large enterprise actually turns out to be really critical. And so we're working on an integration between ServiceNow and Puppet at the moment. If you're looking for some examples of the sorts of things that you can do here, you can go and have a look at Transurban's Puppetize PDX talk that they did, which we can probably paste the link into the channel to make it a little bit easier for folks to find. But it turns out that joining together the system that's tracking all of your assets with an action automation engine like Puppet works really well, where you can start saying, Puppet works out what needs to be done, it fulfills the change request, it gets a success status or a failure status, and then reports that back to ServiceNow. So that the folks who are using ServiceNow as their primary interface can get all of the information they actually need right there, while Puppet's off doing all of the actual work. So if you want to, Fatima Albar, who I'm sure is probably not awake right now, you can go chat to her with any of the questions here, because she's the product manager working on this. We're also starting to see more and more that people are using Puppet for their compliance functionality. So I think, originally Puppet was never built to be a compliance tool, but it turns out that the things that Puppet does really well turn out to be really valuable to security folks, of being able to define the state something's in, to be able to correct that state if that's not the state if it's not in the desired state right now, to be able to give you reports on all of those things, and be able to do this on a continuous basis. So because of this, we started seeing more and more of our users were using Puppet to solve their CIS compliance problems. And so we're actually coming out with an alpha continuous compliance functionality initially focused on CIS. So that's mainly our top request. So I encourage any of you who are working on CIS compliance or interested in this, just come and chat to us in the Slack. And we're going to be working on things like customized benchmarks, reporting capabilities, the ability to schedule scans and do exception tracking and reconciliation. Patch management is another thing that we've seen that a lot of folks are starting to build on their own. And if you have a look at Tony Green's Puppetize PDX talk or his OS patching module, which you can go and grab on the Forge, we've seen that lots and lots of people, it's getting huge amounts of attention. People are starting to adopt it for solving their patch management problems. We've reduced a lot of the complexity around that, and we're actually going to start shipping OS patching in Puppet Enterprise and give you a graphical workflow for managing the patching process and providing change reporting. We really just want to make it as easy as possible for folks to be able to patch nodes when they're already running Puppet Enterprise. And finally, not finally, but if you've seen, you may have noticed that we came out with another product, Puppet Remediate. And what we were looking to try and solve here was a problem we kept seeing over and over again, which was that security teams would produce a spreadsheet of all the vulnerabilities in their environment, send it over to the operations team, who wouldn't have a lot of context necessarily about which nodes were doing what and which vulnerabilities were the most important for them to patch right now. So we're trying to solve that sort of missing link between a lot of folks. So this doesn't necessarily mean you've got Puppet installed or Puppet Enterprise. It's a standalone product and integrates with existing security scanners so that you have an API feed to all of those vulnerabilities, and then you can actually work out how you're going to address them. We've had a whole bunch of really good enhancements lately. So we've been working with Tenable SC, integrating another scanner, and we're now integrated with LDAP and Active Directory so that you can do access permissions inside your environment so you can say who can actually do what in terms of remediating things. And we've done a lot of work on improving the dashboards. So you can go find Puppet Remediate on the Puppet website. We have a few different things coming up in the near-term roadmap, including a full event log for every event being logged, so that you can see what your teammates have actually done in terms of looking to try and address a vulnerability. Because we see that that sort of passing context on from individual to individual is one of those steps that's often broken in this sort of a process. So if you haven't looked, and I said this before, but if you haven't looked at the Forge lately, I highly, highly suggest you go and have a look at it. I think the Forge has always been a really great repository of sort of raw modules in terms of just providing prepackaged modules that other people in the community have worked on that you can download and use, or that you can build upon to fix issues or add features to. But I think we've been working over the last few years on trying to transition it to make it even more accessible to folks and turn it into more of a how-to and give you sort of more guidance in terms of the work you can actually do. So a really good example there is the Windows collection page. And you'll see that we've got a whole bunch of different things there that we've started building in terms of more rich information about getting started. That's pros in terms of videos that really helps you get started using Puppet and gives you a lot more of the context than just sort of here's the module and here's the README. So we have a whole bunch of different collection pages. The Windows one is really, really great there. There's a really good Oracle one. There's a really good one on Chocolatey as well. And finally, the really, really exciting thing that we've been working on too is Relay. And you can go find Relay at relay.sh. And to give you sort of a really quick overview of that is Relay is an event-driven workflow system. Because what we're seeing is that as people are adopting more and more services that aren't necessarily compute services, as infrastructure and automation becomes more democratized, as people are building these self-service APIs around the place, they're honestly rebuilding workflows over and over again, often using something like a CI/CD system, which isn't particularly well suited to it. And for us, we're seeing a lot of parallels here to the early days of configuration management, where people were building their own configuration management systems using shell scripts, and they weren't actually shareable, they weren't particularly composable, and there wasn't a lot of sort of standing on the shoulders of each other and building upon each other's work. It turns out a lot of people are building workflows that are very, very similar to each other. And so Relay is really aimed at solving this sort of a problem. So you can take events that are happening in various kinds of systems, perform actions against them, and make those shareable workflows. With that, thank you very much. It's really great to be here at Upper Camp, and I will see you in the Slack.